Okay. Good afternoon, everyone here. And I would also like to say hello to those in in the wing one, and also for those online participants. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dennis Leung, the head of Department of Mechanical Engineering. I am the moderator of the TechTalk today. So before we invite Professor Li to have the talk, maybe let me first introduce a little bit about the TED Talk. So the TED Talk actually is a series of forums and dialogues given by prominent engineering researchers of diverse academic backgrounds to share their insights on some innovative related topics. The TED Talk today is the second one, and we are very happy that Professor Yuguo Li can deliver this TED Talk that is a very important issues in Hong Kong, that is related to the transmission of virus through the vertical step in buildings. And I hope that, I believe that actually Professor Yuguo Li can highlight some of the risks that is due to this vertical step in buildings in Hong Kong. So before we invite Professor Li to talk, let me first introduce about the background of Professor Li. Professor Li is the previous head of Department of Mechanical Engineering, and he is also the current Associate Dean in research of the Faculty of Engineering. He is a chair professor of building environment in Mechanical Engineering Department. His research topics actually is very wide, including city climate, that is about the urban heat island, environmental study of infection, and also indoor environments. Professor Li is well known. He's very well known for his study of the transmission routes of virus in buildings, particularly for those SARS coronavirus. He has participated in the investigation of two very important pandemics in Hong Kong. One is the SARS in 2003, that is about 20 years ago. And the other is, of course, the recent COVID-19. Professor Li has very strong collaboration with WHO, several CDCs in mainland China, and also Hong Kong Environmental Protection Department. He is a member of the WHO Infection Prevention and Control Guideline Development Group, and also WHO Environmental and Engineering Control Expert Advisory Panel for COVID-19. In 2021, he was awarded the Medal of Honors by the Hong Kong SAR government in considering his contribution in infection control in Hong Kong. So apart from his academic research, Professor Li also served as editor-in-chief of Indoor Air, which is a very important academic journal concerning all aspects of indoor air research. So without further ado, maybe I invite Professor Li.
Thank you. Better quality one. Thanks to Dennis for the kind introduction, also for moderating or chairing this session, and thank you everybody on site and online. And it's a pleasure to update what we have learned in terms of vertical outbreaks. So a lot of people to thank for this particular vertical outbreak. Wang Qun and Professor K.Y. Win and Dr. David Lun and Dr. Kenneth Liang They made a lot of contribution. I will not go to detail of that. So now we are third year into the pandemic. Worldwide, probably more than 300 people were confirmed with SARS-CoV-2 infection, and more than 5 million people died. So the question is, where and how they were infected? And we believe not 100% accepted by everybody. And they were infected indoors. And we learned that much earlier in the pandemic. But not every indoors. They are infected in poorly ventilated indoors. And by inhalation or exposure to exhaled aerosols from the infected, which might contain infectious viruses. And we know possibly the short-range airborne predominance, and the all ventilation rate is not so good. Other route might not be so significant. That's why we learned that better ventilation, masking, social distancing worked. And this is why in Hong Kong, we now have improvement of ventilation in dining restaurants and so forth. So, however, it's interesting. Elsewhere, in Hong Kong, we have a special phenomenon. Among more than 10,000 infections, some of them were infected in a vertical pattern. And those people most of them never met each other. So it's not possible for them to expose to expired aerosols, at least directly. And they are different. So recent ones include 3 Omicrons. As any one of them, Professor K.Y. Yin visited. So those insights very useful. Many people did the work. And normally, Professor K.Y. Yin would attribute the cause of its transmission due to chimney effect. So my task today is to describe what exactly the chimney effects. And in the media, you have all kinds of interpretations. The turbulence in Heng Tai, the first outbreak early on, and Professor Dennis Liang also investigated. And then we have the recent Dongman-Lou, I forgot the English name for it, and there's many different others. So, of course, chimneys, we know this is coming from my hometown, where the chimneys above a rural housing. And we don't have those chimneys in our buildings, of course. Other questions also come across. So if you have something vertical spread of something, how do you reconcile that with what I just mentioned, expired aerosol transmission, short-range airborne? And how do toilet flushing, exhaust fans use affect transmission? In Hong Kong, we worry, should we turn the fan or not turn the fan when we use toilets? I hope to propose something. And then what residents can do and what implication to future. So this whole, the study is still ongoing. So what I described might not be 100%. Perhaps it's useful to go back to the purpose of drainage system. What does building drainage system do? They do a very simple thing. They discharge wastewater from our daily life. And that wastewater need to go down from a drain down to the sewer and leave the city, send somewhere. So you discharge wastewater, and when you discharge wastewater, or when you don't have wastewater to be discharged, the pipe in there, they contain air, and that air is not so good. So you need separate what happened in the pipe and where you live. So what do? You put a so-called water seal. It can be in a U-trap. U-trap normally is between 50 to 75 millimeter tall. It's an interesting one. They can sustain, they can hold on if you have 575, 750 Pascal. That's all. If fluctuation more than that, you might destroy it. So we all know in Hong Kong, the water seal can be disappeared due to evaporation. So if for 1 month or 2 months, you don't add water to it, yeah, your trap disappeared. But in our courses, students learn that it can be also disappeared by something called siphonage. So siphonage occurs, it can be due to self-siphonage, and you do siphonage if the water design is not proper and the water flow is in full. So what people do, in this case, people add a vent, something called a vent. It's different from ventilation. This vent, if you add it to it, then they balance the pressure. They balance the pressure inside the pipe and also at the entry, so that the water seal is protected. So this vent pipe are connected into the drainage stack, the big stack, 150 millimeter, and that one can be 100 millimeter, 75 millimeter, and so forth. They connected into a network, and then they're connected to rooftop, and that's called a roof vent. So roof vent was there, and the stack as a whole was there to discharge water, not for ventilation, but it is a shaft. In case something happened, a chimney may be formed. So let's call the chimney transmission. To learn this chimney transmission has been a long story. It really started what Professor Dennis Liang just described, Amoy Garden outbreak. In this outbreak, someone visited this particular red flat column, flat 7 in block E. He infected more than 300 people in the estate. In a nutshell, we can use the wind airflow to explain the overall distribution among the buildings. And we can also explain why in block E, you have a spatial pattern. And this where the index patient flat 7, and then the very low risk at flats 5 and 6. At the time, I call Hong Kong to buy east. If you buy east, wind is better because our wind coming from northeast or east. So I'm then bought the flat myself, facing the east. Probably I'm safe. However, we also explain why flat 7 were mostly infected by the wind blowing. So this one, all these flats in color, they were infected. A flat, what we did not do to explain was why this flat 7 had this distribution and how those people were infected, mostly upward and 1 or 2 small downward. We had some debate at the time, we did not do it. And subsequently, a lot of people in the literature have done something. They normally attribute the cause something to do flushing. And so I also, those are the experts in drainage systems. So I got into trouble as time goes. So it was not well explained, fully explained, why this one had that distribution pattern. At the time, government officials, health officials, actually consider, as Professor Dennis Liang would remember, the drainage system was the one to blame. So we came up with this airborne and got a little discussion. And we do know that we all agree, both health officials and our study, all agree that droplets, the aerosols came from discharge of water into the stack. And that discharge was from a horizontal branch pipe into the stack, and then with swirling flow, as long as designed properly, you will have that produce aerosols. Aerosols may contain infectious viruses, and the small ones remain suspended in the air duct. And they are leaked into the environment somehow with our theory of airborne. And this we call stack aerosols. Now I call it stack aerosols. Not to be confused with bathroom aerosols. They release into the bathroom where they in fact use. By the way, bathroom aerosols can also be an issue. So during the pandemic, we did find a lot of, in hospital, we could not find it in the air, but we would find it in bathrooms and bathroom handles, bathroom surfaces, wash basin, and so on. So it's probably during time runs fast, we forgot about Amoy Garden. We did not do a lot of studies. We studied a lot of short-range airborne, this kind of thing. In early 2020, 2 such outbreaks occurred in Hong Kong and 1 in Guangzhou. There were not so many. Each of them, in this case, in this Guangzhou one, 1502 infected 2 flats above. Of course, people a little bit panic, not very panic with our 2003 experience. We all worried if the large number of infections could occur again, like in Amoy Garden in these places. That's justified why we have to send apologies to those people involved, send them to quarantine hotels with some evidence. And this one time we had the experience, so we were better prepared, and students were able to go there in this block X and to do some tests, led by my former student, Professor Pang Jian. And very simple. Experiment was inject tracer gas through the toilets, water. You cannot remove that water seal, through that into the drainage pipe, and you measure tracer gas in other places, and you find them, obviously. The question is, how did they get there? So one thing in the beginning, flushing. Of course, flushing important. But you know that when it's flushed, when the water is flushed, where water go, the water actually is water around the pipe. The middle is aerosol. They fall and they eventually go to the manhole and then discharged. So when the water falls, air follows. Where it follows, they produce a negative pressure in the pipe. So it's impossible for the air to, at this time, to go from the pipe into the environment. That can only go in. So flushing cannot explain why the aerosols leaked into the environment. So there must be something else. However, you see, they were all upper families were infected. So something to do with chimney effect, right? So this is natural. So what is chimney effect? Exactly. Very old topic. Franklin studied that. He had a stove. He probably did the first scientific study of chimney. Of course, buoyancy principle, you go back to Archimedes. And took me 2 weeks of hard work through Google Books or archive and find out Piclet. In fluid dynamics, all students will know Piclet number. So Piclet number in analogy to Reynolds number. And he produced this very simple formula telling us how the flow through the chimney works is a function of height. At that time, 18th, 19th century, a lot of chimneys were built for factories, industrialization. That's why chimney. So for this chimney going up, when it's warm, if the chimneys are leaky, lower part of the chimney, air goes in, upper chimney coming out. So there is a neutral level. So that there is lower part, in theory, if all the air always go upwards, lower flats will not be infected. This is what we have observed. However, there are many upward flows. Being high rise, what is high rise? It's high, that's it. The H is high, so H is high. There are many things. Stairwell, it's top-down shaft, rubbish chute, lift hoistway, they all up. And then you have the semi-open space, re-entrance space in Hong Kong. Then Professor Yin, you will see this a lot of time describing semi-open light well. Also, the latest outbreak, considering maybe leaked from the window upwards and the next window. So one professor in PolyU studied this. Which one is possible for this? And that's we can explore. So there are multiple upward flow, and it's very difficult. Coming back to the Block X in Guangzhou, at the time we thought, okay, it looks like they are upwards. So normally the simplest case, actually in reality is more complicated. There are multiple neutral levels. Let's consider one neutral level. And then if you're in that case here, then only upwards can be affected. It can be below that person, by the way. It can be below that, as long as you are above the neutral level. If your index case is below the neutral level, only the upper one can be affected. Interesting. So we thought this might be the reason. Then the logic will become simple. It seems that, you know, in winter, your indoor is warmer. So our pipe normally is outdoors. In theory, the air inside should be similar to outdoors. But you know, now the air might be leaked, enter the stack from indoors, so that the air is warm. And then we should always see an upward pattern, infection pattern. And this one should not happen in summer, because in summer, our rooms are conditioned. The room air is cool. So the air goes to the chimney. There should not be air infection in summer. Reality and the theory sometimes don't agree, not all time. In particular, wrong theory. Luton House outbreak happens in June. We got into trouble because in Luton House, briefly describing the red color index case, and of course, upper level got infected, but there's somebody lower level. This is in summer. If the theory is right, it's called reverse. It should be not the upper level got infected, it should be lower level. So it's interesting that these two vertical columns were actually coming from neighboring flats. And there is very strong. I've never seen this system before. Okay, it's very unique, innovative. At the time, probably, there were no vent pipe, only drainage stack, two drainage stack, but drainage stack are connected. So when you use this toilet and the other pipe stack becomes your vent. Of course, because it's so narrow, a lot of people actually, when they do the maintenance of the toilets, cut them. There's only a few connected, but it's still enough to get a few people infected. In this particular one, this I will not discuss today because time, actually there's also horizontal cluster, opposite flats were infected. So we did a measurement, interesting, in June, and we inject the same way, the tracer gas into the toilets. You find them, they are leaked to other flats. So even in summer, you still see the upwards flow. And of course, some of us believe, oh, it's not drainage system. It's maybe the facade plume, you know, from window going up. Actually, we tried that. It indeed went up. The wind direction that day was from the opposite as compared to the time at the time of exposure. So this got us a little bit into trouble. Of course, in Hong Kong, as I mentioned, we have more than 13,000 cases. And then we had 5 waves. In the first and second wave, in the earlier pandemic, there were 2 outbreaks, as I reported earlier. This vertical one, very small, 7 cases were involved. And in summer, Luchun House, only 1 outbreak. This is very interesting. Only 1 for all those cases, only 1. And then the end of 2020, early 2021, we had 9 outbreaks. That's the time where we thought a lot, you know. Of course, recently we have 3 outbreaks. So now you put all this together, you find out it's about 100 cases out of 10,000, 1% of the outbreak. So it's, relatively speaking, it's not that many. So why we worry is because, you know, you need to have many of them, you have 1 case. But now, as Professor K.Y. Yun mentioned in the newspaper, that only a small number of cases, we already have 3. It's indicating possibly something. You know, whether this whole thing, transmissivity is really high, airborne probability is high. And so what exactly means to us? Of course, we now know each of them don't infect a lot of people. Amoy Garden 1, 300. So anyone can think, oh, what happens between Amoy Garden and this? Amoy Garden, why is in fact so many? If Amoy SARS-CoV-1, people believe human waste contained the virus. So as another exhibit in this Unravelling 2, Professor Zhang Tong will tell you there's a lot in wastewater. But so far, nobody detected viable virus in wastewater. So remember the difference between wastewater and the aerosols during discharge is immediately formed. So it's that aerosols, not wastewater. That aerosol is different. The virus did not stay. We don't know what's in wastewater that killed the virus. Okay, but one thing we do know, we have to suspect. Is there a difference between Amoy Garden and the rest? So what exactly are the differences? And one possibility is that it's not a fecal aerosols. It's not from your solid waste. It's one possible one is from your saliva, your sputum. And we all know when you do a test, you go to test now. What do they test? They put stickers into your mouth and nose. And what they are doing, they collect your saliva, they collect your sputum, the mucus. For those of us, we do release them into wash basin when we use them. I mean, you should do teeth brushing and face washing, whatever you practice in your bathroom. I remember that when I suspected, I told Professor K.Y. Yun, and they took the sample from wash basin, they found it's positive. No evidence, because it's almost impossible to detect the virus immediately after the exposure. But we do know that it is about possibly 5 to 10 minutes, 20 minutes after release. It's during this period, otherwise it's already emptied. It does only one pipe, you know. But we now know the ventilation rate. These are 10 of the outbreaks. And we have done measurement in 6 of them, and 4 being shown with a green tick. So this is very tough measurement. You need to walk up and down and to measure the tracer gas. I really thank those 13 students working so hard. And they all have in general, pattern. And the red one is where the index case lived. And the gray color or the yellow color where the secondary infection occurred, and the remaining are no cases. So you already see a pattern. But there are not so many. Adding together, sufficient statistically significant. So basically that, you know, it's telling you that it's upper level that's infective. So there is one way to describe that. You draw every home a circle and stack up So there are many columns, like in Luchen House, in this one single building, there are 40 columns of flats. And it happened that the index case was here. He infected the family above and their neighbors, one of them below, and also on the same floor, else opposite of his floor. In general, there is a pattern, right? That pattern is, I can give you statistics, there's no need actually, statistically significant. There were so many, 40 by 15, how many flats? Why is only along this, right? It's generally along one vertical column. That's number one, where you have share a vertical drainage stack. Second, you could have situation when you two shared one. They are one, right? They are one, like in Luchen House. Although it's difficult to find, there is only one building gave us trouble. Even today, I don't know. It's this building. Index case was there and then the others. Of course, there might be other transmission routes, but the remaining one consistently tell you one thing. They are all these buildings. If you go back, sorry. Oh, cannot go back. Oh, here. These buildings happen in either public housing, private housing. Building with the entrance space, without a re-entrance space. With light wall, without light wall. It can be different shapes. It has nothing to do with possibly. You know, those are not the most important. Most important is this vertical one. That's why we think possibly the drainage system, the only thing they share is the drainage system. They are very, very different, you know, different one of them. So this is why we suspect it's the drainage system that play most important chimney effect role, okay? And in this hypothesis that you immediately produce those aerosols, and those aerosols, as we described earlier, leaked into the room. And we now know this room, after monitoring, a lot of monitoring, it looks like the ventilation rate in this this chimney is 20 liters per second. So it takes about 10 to 20 minutes to empty this stack, okay? And so then by inhalation. And with faculty support, we built this little, what's called Luchen House system in Yangpa building. Really grateful to Asset Office support. And so we are still finding more data. We have been monitoring this inside wireless kind of monitoring of temperature in Yangpa building all the time, continuously, already more than half a year. So here there's one important question, is about use of exhaust fans. So when you have this chimney effects, and before I mentioned that, there was another thing we found out, is the humidity that matters in these pipes. It's humid air is lighter. So most interesting thing, if you use shower, then the stack effect is huge. All right, so more complexity. So even in summer, this upward flows exist. It's not just non-existence. So now assume we use exhaust fans. The measurement indeed tell you, and here is TechTalk. I don't give you this messy data. It really shows when the exhaust fan runs, the concentration in these toilets actually is higher. So you suck more aerosols into your toilet. What we did not study is that we did not open the doors of the toilets. So this is my personal belief. Scientific principle, very basic, tells me if you open the doors, that negative pressure does not exist. Ventilation is very, very important. To be consistent with what we described earlier on, it's better when you use bathrooms. Open your door or keep your door ajar. A little hole will help. The pressure disappears. Yeah, I know in the newspaper that people recommended don't turn on the exhaust fan. No good. Your bathroom needs ventilation. Yeah. So that's very basic. So this is important. We have not, yes, it's true that this exhaust can be risky, but with sufficient dilution, they don't exist. So this is a very important message. Keep doors open or ajar when you use bathroom. It's also interesting, it took us a little time to realize, because I'm really not expert on drainage system, 2-year study, that with a lot of help from our civil engineering, we learned that actually this stack will go into the first manhole, and this first manhole, the stack overall is an individual system. And it's this system that matters in our world. Now I suspect this saliva is important, that getting into wash basin or even toilets, right? And then a subsequent hypothesis might be made, cannot be proven. And that is when you do whatever you do in front of your wash basin, you leave some of your sputum and saliva on the bottom of your wash basin. Assume this is the infected person. Of course, when they discharge, they cause vertical outbreak. If some of them are not discharged, next user, we encourage hand washing. Next user, you might be exposed to the aerosolized thing. No evidence, however, there was one cleaner in Nanjing airport. That's how I was locked up for more additional week in Beijing when I was doing my sabbatical. So telling my boss I was working in hotel. So that's why we have a few small papers warning people that there is a possibility. This is a possible route. So according to our Hong Kong medicine study, 30% of people in Hong Kong actually spit into wash basin in public toilets. So it's a little bit of knowledge to learn. Now, quickly going through what we need to do, finishing up. I found out the building department has a very nice website with videos telling people what to do. It's on YouTube. I saw not so many people visiting it. So I try to help them to promote. I don't know them. I know some of them, but no, they did not tell me to do this. I found they are useful. Fill water traps, do not forget any holes. It's simply, if you don't use your bathroom for a long time, perhaps you have rubbish, use temporary storage, you better find them and fill them regularly every 2 weeks. Keep door ajar or open when you turn the exhaust fan, and do use the exhaust fan, will improve ventilation. And we still, perhaps you can spit onto tissue paper and throw them away through rubbish bin. And people also worry, oh, this one rubbish chute may got into trouble. Very low probability. So only if this worsens, we go to that extreme. I'm not recommending you wear a mask all the time you go to toilets, but only if this Omicron got so much, you do that. One important thing, that's why I described the basics of vents and drainage, siphonage. Not many people know in the public. If anyone hear this, we have seen quite a few people change their, we know the need of change, each one of us know, but perhaps asking professional engineer to help. There are 160,000 manholes and possibly 2.5 million homes and 350,000 business units. If I assume this group of stacks serve 25 families, only for housing alone, you will find 100,000 vertical drainage stacks. And as I mentioned, each stack, they can produce their own aerosols, they can distribute their own aerosols efficiently. If the stack, let's see, opposite negative buoyancy, in particular in summer, it could happen. Then actually the fall air, the dirty air actually leaked into street. Sometimes I suspect we don't monitor them. So I suspect when I visited some places, I smell them. I can smell, I mean, we all know what is H2X. You can smell them. So I feel there are perhaps a need to go beyond the pandemic. If it's just what you can easily ask, is there any other infection being transmitted by this? It is because of great effort put into pandemic. We were able to identify these 15 outbreaks. There may be some others. We probably have forgotten about the space in this 100,000 and probably even 300,000 vertical pipes. They are a concern. So my summary, very likely the source aerosols formed during discharging of wastewater. They are transported by chimney effect induced flow because the chimney, this thing have minimum dilution, and probably by inhalation. So keep drain airtight, keep door ajar, and no spit into wash basin, and wear a mask. So it remains unknown why these outbreaks only observed in Hong Kong and Guangdong, not elsewhere. Thank you very much.